We are back, and I can tell you, we have a former policeman here with us, and he's in Pretoria, and he says to me it's cold. And if you look at his clothing, man, yeah, it looks cold. It really looks cold. But anyway, it's warm in Phuket. It's quite nice this side. But we're talking to Colonel Chris Botha. Now, like so many of my guests, he started in the railway police. Excellent unit. I can tell you, we've learned so much about the railway police by talking to these people. This one came to us also through Andre Olivier, a legacy chaplain. Want to thank Colonel Olivier as well. Colonel, very welcome. Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for you. And I wonder, can you tell me, how did this happen to you? How did you end up in the railway police?
Of course, yes, thank you very much. You know, I was a young man. I left school in Standard 8. I was the youngest of 5 children, and my father passed away when I was very young, 11 years old. So my mom, at the end of the day, she tried to keep ends meet, and at the end of the day, at Standard 8, I said, no, let me rather go out, and I started school. I started, and then my then future brother-in-law was a member of the railway police, and then one day he told me, he said to me, why don't you join the police? I went to the railway, I started, my apprenticeship, or I went to do the test to be an apprentice electrician. And he said to me, look, they don't pay a lot. You're going to work 5 years before you're going to get a decent pay. Why don't you join the railway police, and then from there, see what happens. If you then decide you don't want to be a policeman, then you can always go and follow your dream of being an electrician. So in the 19th of January 1976, I started in the railway police in Pointons, the head office, as a roofie. The steward constable is in old terms, but also in the railway police, you were a roofie. And I was a messenger. Young policeman, at that age, I was 16 years old. And I only became 17 in March of that year. And I was also, what they call the switch bitch. You work on the switchboard, pulling wires and putting calls through. And apart from that, I was also, messengers, taking messages, from the railway police to the SAP and so on. And the guy that appointed me in the railway police was staying with an uncle of mine. He had a granny flat that he was staying in. So when I met him there, and I went to the head office, and I saw him there, I said, hello, and he looked at me, he says, hey, I'm not your I'm a sergeant. I said, okay, sorry. I've got to learn, there's new issues. So while working at the Pointons building, I had a few guys working with me there, or I was working with, that played a big part and big role in my police career. If I can recall, Don Venter, he was a warrant officer at that time, and we used to play horses together. I used to gamble a little bit. And then he told me, you know what, I see you're going to college. I said, yeah, now I'm going to college. He says, I've got a surprise for you. I said, yeah, okay. He said, I'm going as well. He said, but you know what? You won't last 3 months in that college because you're very arrogant. But yes, I was a very arrogant young man at that stage. And so at that stage, he said to me, I'm telling you now, you're not going to last 3 months. He says, because I will be there and I'll make sure. So when I got to the college, the very first, we used to call a bus, it was PT on a Friday, the guys that made mistakes, or the guys that didn't clean their place properly, they had PT. And he appointed me as the permanent bus driver. So eventually, after the 6 months, I finished, and he said to me, I really thought that you're not going to make it. I said, but you don't know me. And unfortunately, as he said, you know, you're an arrogant little guy. I was arrogant enough to tell him, look, you're not going to break me. I will go whenever I want to go. So in 1977, as I was in college, I was appointed, and I was sent to Louis Botha Airport. So I went to Louis Botha Airport, and then I requested a transfer from Louis Botha Airport to Bayhead, because it was nearer for us. You know, we had to get up very early to go to Louis Botha Airport. And in Bayhead, we started, and from there, I met my wife, and she was working, but I met her father before I met her, because her father was, I was in the taxi squad. We were working, you know, doing copper cable theft, and her father used to, when there was a signal wires cut, we found him, he came and replaced the wire. So I met him 6 months before I met her. And then one day, while we were there, I made sure that when I went to visit her, that her father wasn't there. Because she told me, you know, you see the Sergeant Major, the way she was talking, it reminded me of Sergeant Major, you know, with the moustache and, you know, the big tummy and that. And so one Sunday we were enjoying ourselves, and I heard a car. I said to her, oh, it seems to me you got the family visiting. She says, no, I think it's my dad. And I thought, oh, now I have to face this man. So as he walked in, I said, hello, Koos, what are you doing here? He says, what are you doing in my house? I said, no, I'm my girlfriend. He says, that's my daughter. Eventually, we got married. And only then, after we got married, we realized that her father and my father used to go and dance together here in the Bergsig in Pretoria. So they knew each other already by that time. But unfortunately, as I said earlier, my father passed away on a very early age when I was 11 years old, and he was about 48. And so we got married in that year of 1979. And in 1980, they wanted people to attend the tin training course at Manuskop in Groblersdal. So I got a nomination, I went, never realizing that this was part of the first part of the training steps for the guys for the task force. So we went, and we were there in the college, and I recall we had a Sergeant Bum. And I went to him and I said to him, you know, they stole my water bottle. And the Sergeant Bum looked at me, he says, improvise. I said, all right. If I have to improvise, and I stole his water bottle. And I said, because he can get one easier, but you know, they got stories. So I improvised, I took his water bottle. And then when we finished with our training course, I went to him, I said, you know, Sergeant, remember you were looking for your water bottle? I said, yeah, it is. You told me to improvise, and I made an improvisation. Here's your water bottle. He says, but I can't recall it. I said, but I can recall it because I was the one that took it. Then from the training college, from Manuskop, we went back to Durban. And then they said, okay, but you guys that was there at Manuskop, the tin training course, or the SWAT, as they also called it, you guys must go back to the college as part of the training for the task force. So then eventually I went, and I met a lot of these guys like Eddie Trollip and Henny van der Merwe, Koos Botha. And unfortunately, my nemesis was Flip Schutte. I knew Flip Schutte from Durban. Flip Schutte knew my brother very well. So naturally, I didn't have much eyebrows or much to think or to say about Flipskip at that stage. I hated these guys. But naturally, we went through the training course. We did the task force training, and they transferred me from Durban to Pretoria. So in 1980, after completing the task force training, I started on Durban, Pretoria station. And then in January of 81, they told me, look, you have been trained in urban terrorism as in terms of the task force as well as the tin training at Miljoeskop. We need people to go to the border, and they sent me. Eventually, we were not supposed to go, but because I was already trained in tin as well as the task force, they sent me. So we went in 1981. I went to the border. I came back, and I came back the Saturday, and the Monday morning, my son was born, my firstborn. So yeah, and then eventually he wasn't a month old. There was a problem on the border, and then they sent me back. They said, no, you're already trained, and this one person had a problem. He had to come back, but we're sending you. So eventually, when I got back, my son was 6 months old. So then in 1982, one day I came on duty, and the guys told me, they said, the people of internal security wants to see you. And I thought to myself, wow, what did I do wrong? Because, I mean, I never done anything wrong as far as I know. So eventually I went to see them, and the very first question they asked me is, what do you know about the ANC? I said, well, this is what I know, and this is what I know, and this is what I know. And they gave me a form with about 11 pages. They said, go and complete this. So now they're asking about my father, my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law, and my grandfather, you know, that vetting document. So eventually, my brother phoned me. He says to me, what the hell have you done? Why is internal security looking for you? Why are they asking questions? I said, I don't know. They asked me a lot of questions. I don't know. My wife's grandfather, very humble man. I loved him very dearly. And he said to me, my son, come sit next to me. He says, you must talk to Opa. Why is internal security guys looking for you? I said, Opa, I don't know. This is what happened. He says, you know what? You must tell Opa, because Opa knows a lot of people on high places. So eventually, when they appointed me to go to internal security, my days with the task force, and that was done. Unfortunately, I would have liked to continue at that stage, but I also had a dream of going, you know, into internal security, and also to be a spy, you know, a spy. But unfortunately, you know, sometimes we try to do things our way. But God always has a plan for each and every one of us, and He directs us wherever He wants us to go. So in 1982, I started with the internal security, and I can recall in 1983 with the Church Street bomb. On that specific day, one of the brigadiers from the Railway Police head office in Johannesburg came through, and then usually they picked me up, and I would go and, you know, drive them to pointings where the bombs in Church Street, and I would wait for them there until they finished with the meeting, and then I would drive them back, and they would drop me at the station, and then from there they would proceed through to Johannesburg. And that specific day, I was sitting right across from the Golden Egg, waiting for the brigadier to come. And it wasn't long after that he came in and said to me, you know, the meeting was done, so we could go. And as we were driving back to the station, the Pretoria station, we heard a loud bang. And when we got to the office, we heard that it was a bomb that exploded in Church Street. And then only did I realize that if meeting did continue, I wouldn't have been there, and I wouldn't have had the chance to complete my police career. So yeah, and then you realize, that God always has a plan for each and every one of us, and He directs us in places wherever He wants us to go. So in 1985, while being still in the railway police, I was sent over to the SAP to go and learn the ropes in terms of administration and those things. For when our people come over, at least I'm there to assist them in showing them what needed to be done and how and what and where. So I was about 5 or 6 months before we went over in 96 or 86. I was already there with the SAP at the Compound building, the old museum. So, and then it continued in 1990. They transferred me to what they called that time MEOFs. It was a unit working with statistics. So at that time, I've learned a lot about statistics. But coming back to my time when I was still with the railway police, the internal security, there's a few guys that really played a big role in my life, in directing my life. I'm looking at William Chamberlain, Colonel William Chamberlain, Captain Isaac Mostert, Jan Heck, Warrant Officer Jan Heck. I'm looking at Sergeant Freddy Letswalu. I'm looking at Sergeant Marubeni, Samson Marubeni. Those are guys that really taught me a lot in terms of internal security, in terms of who I was, in terms of what I am able to. Apart from the guys like Andre Williefield and Flip Skitter and those guys, apart from them, this was also people that built it into my later life as part of internal security. Then in 1996, I was then transferred back to the operational side of internal security, where to the gathering part. And then one day, my commander came to me. He says to me, you are transferred. I said to him, okay, where am I transferred to? He said, no, we want you with this brigadier to start a unit performance evaluation. So we had to measure the performance of the guys at the railway, that thing, the gathering part and so on. And it wasn't long after that I got home and I got to the office. I was a lot out of the office. I was traveling a lot. And then coming back that specific day, I saw this guy walking up and down in the passages. And I asked him, can I help you, sir? He says, no, I'm looking for so-and-so and so-and-so. I said, well, that's me. And my brigadier, or that time they called them the directors. The director wasn't there. He said, I said, but he's out, and I'm here if you want to see me in connection with what is it? He says, no, I believe you're working with me. I said, no. Sorry, I'm not working with you. I am working with us, and we are performance evaluation. He says, no, you are working with me now. Do you have a problem? I said, no, I don't have a problem. It's just I don't know about any of this information that you are telling me about. So at the end of the day is, that is how my scope or the plan God had for me changed completely. And we started with performance evaluation, and eventually we went over, we became Inspectorate. And at that stage, I was a captain, and I was promoted later on in 1996 to Lieutenant Colonel. And only later in 2013, I was appointed as a full colonel. So at the end of the day, as I said, there was a lot of people that played a very big role in my life. There was a lot of guys, like, as I said, Andre Willifeer, Flipskitter, guys like Eddie Trollip and Dion and all those guys, of the task force. We were a very close-knit unit. And only later on, the one guy that was working with me, he told me about this Andre Willifeer, and he showed me a picture of Andre Willifeer. I said, yeah, but this was the guy that was who trained me in 1980 with the Railway Police Task Force. He says, no, I'm with him in the house cell. He's my pastor. I said, oh, that's good. And then Andre, I sent Andre a message, and he said to me, no, you come immediately. We're going to have a breakfast in Kempton Park on Saturday. You make sure that you are there. And then as I got there, I was brought back into the group. And, it was a privilege for me to be part of those guys and part of the railway police. I was proud to be a railway policeman for many years. And even today, if I look back in my life, if it wasn't for the training that we received within the railway police, I would have been an arrogant little guy, and I would probably would have been divorced and all that stuff. And luckily for me, God gave us two beautiful children. My wife, we've been married. We will be married in the 1st of September this year. We'll be married 44 years. So we're very proud to be associated with not only the railway police, but also the railway police task force, because those guys were excellent guys in my life. And they played a very big role even today. We had the chance to even sit with Flipskitter, and I told him how I felt. And he says to me, it's one of those things, either you like me or you hate me. I said, no, but you know what? I only realized after that I deserved what I got because I was arrogant. So, we really enjoyed it. And even today, every time we get together, we enjoy the fellowship, the camaraderie, the fellowship, the spirit that's within the team. Unfortunately, we've lost some people, lately. But it's always a privilege to be able to share with other people what these guys meant to me. As I said, talking about Andre Willifeer, Flipskitter, talking about Dan Venter, Bernie van der Walt, looking at guys like William Chamberlain and Isaac Mostert and Jan Heck and all those guys. Those are the guys that schooled me, trained me, and gave me a purpose in life.
Well, ek moet vir jy sê, ons is dankbaar om dit te hoor. And I just want to say to the English people, you know what, we decided we'll speak both languages. So you just have to bear with us here. It's nice for me to speak Afrikaans, to be honest, because I never speak it at home. At home we either speak English or French. That's what happens when you marry an uitlander, soos ons sê. Maar dit ek 'n paar vrae vir u, kolonel. Maar ek wil net gou 'n statement maak hier so dat in die laaste maand en 'n half was daar 2 spoorwegpolisiemanne opgewees en al 2 is deur die lesers, die ouens wat kyk, gesê dit is die beste episodes wat ooit op Legacy was. Een was Flipskitter, en ons wil nog vir kolonel Skitter kry om terug te kom, en die ander een was Lou Hatting. Lou Hatting was betrokke daar by die bouing wat ouens geskaap het daar by in Malawi. Verstommende mense wat hier uitgekom het, maar daar het ook ouens na my aangekom en gesê, Koos, jy moet 'n bietjie meer detail kry uit die manne uit, so ons gaan nie nou gebruik as 'n proefkonyn as jy nie omgee nie. Ek wil net ek is seker, toe jy as 'n jong seun, 16 jaar oud daar aankom by die spoorwegpolisie, ek meen hierdie is harde manne, ek meen ons harde baard ouens en soos enige polisiemanne. En ek kan julle die versekering gee, jy's nie langer as 2 jaar in die polisie voor jy hard raak nie. Jy sien dinge, jy ervaar dinge wat werklik waar op jou, dit vat aan jou siel. En ek dink as jy nie
Ja,
'n geloof het en as jy nie die Here vind iewers nie, gaan jy begin syp, jy gaan op die verkeerde pad gaan. Ek weet nie of dit die ervaring ook was nie, maar het hulle laat welkom voel? Het die ouer manne vir daarom gesê, hoor hy tot op die manier hoe hulle nou dink hulle is nice, wat nou nie heeltemal is soos ander mense nie. So hoor hy seun, ons kyk na jou.
ja. Yes, kan met die Afrikaans of Engels vir jou aangaan. Yes, there was, when you come there as a young boy out of school, you were in school, you were an arrogant little guy. And, you thought you knew everything. But then you start meeting guys like Van Dijk, Jan Van Dijk of Johan Van Dijk. What is his name? Gert. Gert, his father, he was in the railway police, he was a detective. And there was a few guys, like I said, Don Venter. There was a guy that also taught me a lot about hobos. He says to me, you know what? A hobo is a person that's not always drunk, and they can add valuable information or he was part of the investigation into Tertius, the cricket player that was murdered. He also told me a lot. Then there was some of the women working there that also played a big role, like Rina Schreiber, Marina Burger, who was the Captain Burger, the detective, his daughter, and I think it's Colleen, Sergeant Colleen. Those were the guys that made me feel welcome. And looking at the Captain Stapelberg, he used to call me and say, "Come and sit here." And then I had to write up all the mail and so the mail can be sent out. And those were people that really, as I said, they played a big role in my life. Being a young person, they also guided me a lot and said, you mustn't do this, you mustn't do that, you must be careful to do this, you must be careful to do this. And as I said, Sergeant Smith, when I said to him, he says, "I'm not your I'm your sergeant now." So, those were guys that really, I must come back to when I was working in the Bay police station. We had a Sergeant Page. I will never forget him. He was an Englishman. And, we used to make statements and then we take it to him. He wanted to see the statements. And he would look at the statement. He says, "What rubbish is this?" And he tore it up and throw it away. He says, "No, you forgot this, you forgot that, you forgot this, and you forgot that." And then you had to go in your own time, retake that statement or make arrangement with the person to retake that statement before he was satisfied. And as you rightly said, there was a lot of people that played a big role in a person's life and groomed us to what we became. And it was for me personally, those things as a young guy coming out of school, and unfortunately, my father passed away at a very young age. So the only person that was there in my life that played a big role in the father figure was my brother, and I hated his guts because he was very difficult and he was very strict with me. As I said, I was arrogant, and then later on, he played a big role. So I didn't really have a father figure except my brother. And as it was, as I said, I was arrogant. I didn't always listen to him. So me and him, we were loggerheads most of the time until one day we met at the funeral of the aunt of ours. And there we really clicked as brothers and became brothers. And during that time, there was a lot of people that taught me and guided us as young policemen, young men coming out of the college, coming out of school. And how it is when you at that age, you think you know everything. And then you only realize that you don't know everything. there's a lot to learn. And if you were not prepared to learn, you wouldn't make it. And thanks to those people, I was able to complete my police career after 43 years and 2 months, and as a full colonel.
Colonel, I hear what you're saying, and it's fascinating to me. Once again, there's people who ask me to ask for a bit more details. I've heard several railway policemen tell me about this Friday afternoon story at Esland Park at the college, which you people refer to as a boss or something. Can you tell us more? What actually happens there? Do you run around with a sandbag, or do you just drill around, or it depends on the duty sergeant?
No, you know, apart from the 2.4 that we did, you know, with your whole kit and everything on, we also played a lot of struggle ball, where we played with you know, the medicine ball. And, you know, there was the time that you could, if you got something against somebody, you know, you could sort him out there. And I remember one day, I think Andre Olivier picked up a ball and, you know, he was shunting us around. And I tried to grab the ball from him, you know, and as he kicked back, it hit me right in the mouth. And it was only blood. But that was part of the game, you know. You didn't cry about it because you knew that playing struggle ball, there is going to be difficulty, there is going to be injuries, there is going to be, somebody's going to tackle you very hard. And then also the boxing. You know, I was glad that I never had to box against Eddie Trollop, because Eddie Trollop was one of those guys. He was fast and he hit hard. And usually, you know, Andre used to pair us up size by size. So one day, you know, I used to box against also Botha, Flores. And then one day I was giving yes, a few shots, Flores, and then Andre really said to me, oh, so jy's wind gehad, nee? And then he took me, and the two of us, we had a bit, you know, about boxing bout, I'm telling you, and he panel beated me good. And then, but that was part of it. But as I said, I was glad that I never had to box against Eddie Trollop, because Eddie was fast, and you know, he could box. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I didn't know if they ever told you about the incident that happened at Malioskop, where we had a run-in with the SAP task force, and then Eddie was in the middle of this, and it was during a rugby game, and the task force guys came and they interfered, and then, you know, the whole thing started there. And then Eddie told this guy, he says, well, let's go outside. And then they hit him from behind. And then they had to flew in our general, and also that time, the one of the SAP task force, they had to bring them in to bring calm and peace within the camp. But yeah, Eddie didn't have you know, he was never chicken. He could stand behind those fisteries, and that is why I said I was glad I never had to box against him. But as you say, you know, the training that was there that we did on the Friday, you know, with the full kit and everything, we did the 2.4, we did the struggle ball, we did the boxing. That was part of it, you know, just to simmer down and to get all the pressure off again, because, you know, as it is, you know, while the training is there, you know, you build up aggression, and that, so we had to get that aggression off, and that was part of it.
This unit which you're talking about, internal security, would it be possible to tell us a bit more about it? Exactly what your people were doing?
You know, at that stage, as the railway police, you know, we did focus on terrorism, urban terrorism, especially on the trains and that, you know, like the task force was there to when there was a situation, you know, hostage situation, whatever it is, we gathered information in terms of attacks on railway lines, bombs that was planted. And so internal security as such, we focused on urban terrorism, especially on the trains and the boats and the aeroplanes and that. So that was an extension, you can say basically it was extension, the task force training was extension on information received with regard to possible terrorist attacks and that. So, and then we also focused a lot on information, not only, where they make use of the trains or the buses to come into the land, at the border post. The border post was also part of us at that stage. So that was all part of gathering information of possible attacks against our people in South Africa. And that was the role that we played within the internal security.
That's fascinating. So you would be then sharing this information with the security branch or military intelligence, national intelligence. Were you ever working together, or were you just aware of each other perhaps?
No, we worked a lot together, especially after 1983, the bomb explosion in Church Street. That was why the meeting was held in Poynton's building, which was the military wing. So our people used to come to attend those meetings in the Poyntons. But, we played a big role with the SAP, the internal security, the National Intelligence Agency. So, we were integrated with them, and we received information, we shared information, and that was part of it. We didn't stand on our own, because also in 1984, we had an incident that we were working with the SAP to catch the terrorist that was involved with the Church Street bombing. And we had information that he's coming through at Mohamba border post. So with the SAP and those people together, there was an operation that was held in Mohamba. But unfortunately, the one guy that we had there that would have identified him, when he saw him, he made a scene, and then this guy got the message and they fled. But eventually they did catch him.
So I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of liberals, who for some reason do watch Legacy. Normally they only do that to give us a thumbs down and to complain at YouTube that we are, I don't know what they complain about. There's something wrong with these people. But this was not something like Eugene de Kook's flop class. I just want to be sure. This was not the assassination squad at all. No,
this has got nothing to do with them. When I was in the railway police, we only got to know about them when we went over. And it was only in, say, 1989 that we really got to do, while we were then in the SAP, that we got to know about de Kock and these people, Flak Plaza and those, only then.
Yes, the railway police never had any such type of units as far as I know, and no one has ever said that the railway police had any such units.
No.
Yeah, and I doubt whether you would ever have had it, because your people were just a different mindset.
No, definitely. We were a different mindset, different focus that the SAP had. Our focus primarily was on the trains and the buses and the aeroplanes and the ships. Those that that form part of the railway.
Now, you talked about the SAP museum, and I can tell these people who didn't know about it, or I think it's still there somewhere in Pretoria. But in my time, I had the Pangaman, and I don't know what else there. It was a very frightening place. It's like you walk around there, you can actually feel the crime scenes, there is a feeling with it. Did you detect anything like that? I mean, you were much more experienced policeman by that time, probably not bothered with such things, but I definitely, a few times I walked there, thought to myself, if this Pongo man comes alive here, I'm shooting him.
You know, as you said, rightly said, you know, we were on the second floor. The museum is on the first floor. We were on the second floor. But at night, you know, especially if you're working late nights, you would feel uncomfortable. You know, you wouldn't feel as if there's really anybody there. But you know, you heard strange noises, and you know, it was always in the back of your mind. But you know, here is some evidence about murders that took place and witchcraft and all those stuff. So you always had that funny feeling. But I think most of the time it was also in the mind. You know, when you're there, you start hearing noises and yeah. I mean, even in some of the buildings, you had that same, you know, heard those noises and then where you don't expect the noises to come from. Yeah, it was one of those things.
Did the railway police ever had like a museum, like the SAP one, which we just spoke about?
I cannot recall that there was ever one, unless it was somewhere perhaps in Johannesburg, but as far as I can recall, I can never recall any museum that we had specifically in terms of that. Perhaps Andre or one of those guys would be able to tell you more, but from my side, I can't recall that we ever had a railway museum where we had, you know, our stuff was it. It's only now recently that with Barney and Farney and those guys, that they had the monument. They had a place and that, but before that, no, there wasn't one as far as I know.
I want to ask you about something here, the Inspectorate, and I don't know, of course, how far you can tell us about it, but am I correct, sir, if I say the Inspectorate is the guys who actually investigate the police? Because you do find policemen, I'm sad to say, they act outside the law. And then, of course, it must be investigated, and if needs be, they need to be punished, to be brought back into the framework which everybody agreed to, the law. Am I correct, sir, if I say that's the function of the Inspectorate?
I will disagree with you in the sense that, you know, the purpose of the Inspectorate was there to guide, to make sure that the guys follow the guidelines. And if they are off the guideline, to bring them back and say, you know, in terms of this regulation, in terms of this is how it's supposed to be done. Yes, we did investigations in terms of looking at the quality of the dockets. We looked at the quality of the investigations and saying, you know, yeah, this was supposed to be done. You haven't done that. Why wasn't this done? You should do this. You should do that. You should do that. So, you know, and we had within the Inspectorate, we had specialists in various fields. You know, the supply chain part, the finance part, the human resource, the detectives and, you know, crime prevention and crime intelligence. So within those fields, we had the specialist guys that was working there for years and that knew the regulations. And those were that was a purpose from the Inspectorate, is to realign the focus of the people in terms of what the regulations and the legislation predicts them to do. Yeah, that was our purpose.
Would they listen to you? Would they accept your guidance, or would they become Ramiki Eitnak and just decide no, they won't?
You know, there is some people that would really say, but why was I never told this in college, or why didn't the people tell me that? There was some, you know, I can, after 19 years with the Inspectorate, I can recall, say, about 10, 12 people that really took the information we gave them to heart, that made a difference. And at the end of the day, one of the things that was part of, that I usually taught my people that was working under me, is you can leave a legacy behind. If there's only one person that does the right thing, eventually he's going to teach somebody else. And before you know it, you've got 10, 20 people doing the right thing. But as long as you guide them and you get one or two persons to do the right thing, you've left a legacy behind, because they will teach other people. There's a lot of people that were very arrogant, that thought they know everything. I recall in Strand, there was a guy working for crime intelligence, at the station, and they had a spate of housebreakings. And I said to him, why is there, within the last 3 months, why is there a spike in housebreakings? And this guy was very arrogant. He says to me, you think I'm God that I knows everything? I said, no. I said, you are doing the analysis in terms of why these things, and you should know why this happened. So eventually I started to unpacking the situation. I said to him, all right, on this side of where the housebreaking is taking place, what is happening there? He says, no, nothing. So, it's a felt, and then there's the highway. I said, on this side, no, it's houses. That side, it's houses. In front, there's a shopping center. I said, okay, if there's a shopping center, there's a throughway for the people. I said, but isn't there any people that is building or anything? When I said that, he said, you know what, Colonel? They started building houses. I said, all right, how long ago? And he kept quiet. He says to me, you know what? I never thought about it 3 months ago. I said, you see, that is why we are here, to assist you, to make you attend of what is happening. And eventually, after deliberation and looking at what can be done, within 3-4 months, their housebreaking came down with nearly 250%. And by that, this is just somebody else looking from another perspective, looking at what is happening. And when I told him that, he realized, okay, but you know what? I never thought about this. And then from there on, he made a big difference by analyzing the situations on each and every situation. So that is what we did. And there's a few of them, as I said, I can recall about 10, 12 people that I know that made a difference through the years, or that we made a difference to, and they themselves made a difference in their environments.
Would you say that fighting crime is actually a science? There's more to it than just driving down the street in a van. You actually have to use your brain a bit.
Definitely. At the end of the day, is, if you ask a person modus operandi, what is the modus operandi of this? You cannot call it, but if you don't look into the modus operandi of a person, you will never catch the criminal. Because, when I used to ask the guy, I said, what is your modus operandi? Then he looks at me, he says, what do you mean? I said, okay, when you get up in the morning, what is the very first thing you do? And you do it every day. That's your modus operandi. If you go to your car, and you get into your car, the way you do the things there is your modus operandi. So each and every one of us has a modus operandi, the way we do things. And by that is a signature for us, we to identify in order to catch the criminal. And as it is, crime today is not just randomly, it's a science. Because if you don't know these type of things, you're never going to catch them. And if you don't, because in the olden days, we used to, the detective used to do all that stuff that the crime intelligence guys are doing today. They never stopped, they never went to sleep until they had all the information. And that was a science, and today, it became specialized, even with cybercrime and all those things. It's a specialist field. And if you don't have that knowledge, the know-how, you're never going to make a success, even in our country. Our people is not trained enough to make a difference.
Do you think, Colonel, it's possible that the private sector can somehow assist with this training? As I recall, when I became an attorney, I realized that where our training in the college and in the police actually lacked was civil law. Because many times we would walk into a house disturbance or where the husband and the wife has some kind of a fight with each other, and they would look to us for advice. But we had no clue how to advise them. We had absolutely no clue. So we would just say, it's a civil matter, we're not getting involved, and we go off to the next crime scene. And I actually volunteered my services as well as other attorneys and advocates. But the police in those days, I'm talking 98, 99, were just not interested in us. But do you think, sir, that it's possible that the private sector can say, guys, let's come and help you instead of just always throwing, what on the poor policeman trying to do his job?
I do believe so. Looking back at as I said, within the Inspectorate, I do believe that the private sector can play a big role in assistance, because if you look in terms of the banks, financial, they got the know-how, they got the people with the experience, and that, especially when you have corruption and those things, SARS and all those people, they can play a big role. Even some of the companies, like the IT companies, those people can play a very big role with us in terms of assisting us when it comes to cybercrime and all that stuff. I definitely, I agree 100% with you that each and every person, not even the companies, each and every person today is a potential witness, is a potential informer, is a potential contact that can play a valuable role in addressing crime, because they see and hear things, and they can always assist us and guide us with that. And we cannot stand on our own in terms of that. Those people play a valuable role. As I said to you earlier in our conversation, Eddie, that used to teach me about the hobos. He said, we see a hobo lying there in the street and you think, okay, he's drunk. Who is going to listen to this man because he's drunk? But he's not always drunk. Sometimes he's 100% sober, and we don't look into that. We don't think that this man's information might be valuable.
Yeah, it's all about common human decency. I mean, how many times have the maids in a house actually give us the best information possible? I think of one police officer who murdered his wife or something, and he got caught because his maid, the maid saw his shoes or something. I can't recall really, but these people are important. Everyone is important.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
I just want to make sure you mentioned Tertius. I think it was a cricketer, Tertius Bosch. Was he a dentist or something? I think he got poisoned. I speak on a correction. I don't know what happened further.
Yeah. According to the information that was they showed that time, the nurse was adamant. I can't recall his surname now, but he was adamant that Tertius Bosch was poisoned. And eventually, they continued the investigation, and later on, they did, as far as I can remember, they did determine that he was in fact poisoned.
Yes, we're speaking on a correction here, and I believe his wife was the main suspect, but I do not know whether she was ever arrested or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we're not pointing any fingers. I just want to be clear here before somebody start to sue us. But that's fascinating to me, because it's not really being a policeman is almost a calling. Would you agree with that? It's not just a normal job. You can't just take somebody from the street and say, right, you're a policeman now. It takes training. It takes time.
No, that's definitely. Now that you say it's a calling, I recall I was 2 years old, And I was in the hospital in Duivelskloof because they thought I had TB. And we had an old sergeant that used to come and visit my parents. And only later on, my mom told me that I always wanted to be a policeman because of this sergeant that used to come and visit us, because I liked the uniform and the gun and all those stuff. And yeah, eventually I became a policeman. Jy weet, net so vinnig vir jou iets sê wat ek altyd gedoen het. Jy weet, as jy by jou ou kom, of when you start with interaction with a person, you need to know on which level to start with a person, especially when it comes to training and that. And one of my common questions would be, I see you sitting on the beach with a drink in your hand. Tell me what you see. And that guy would then simply come and say, you know, I see me sitting on the beach with a drink in my hand. And I said, okay, are you sitting on a chair? Are you sitting on a towel? Are you having a cold drink or having a beer? Because I need to know on which level I need to speak to this person. And by doing that, I could determine which level I had to start right from the bottom and start building up, or you know, in the middle, or you can start on top. That is one of the most things, even today. When you come to a person, you need to give training. We need to determine first, where do we start with them in order to there. And then that's the same thing when you come and start sharing knowledge of the Bible or whatever it is. We need to know on which level to start with people.
Now that you're looking back, and I'm sure there will be a lot of railway policemen and other policemen watching here as well. Do you have any advice there? Do you have anything to say to these people who might not have seen you since, you know, 1977 or whenever?
You know, they asked me when I went on pension, they asked me, if you have to leave something behind, what will it be? And the only thing that I could say was, whatever you do, trust in the Lord. And whatever you achieve, give God the glory. Because it's through Him and only through Him that He will make it possible for you to achieve and whatever you achieved. And you know, that was very important for me to also just share with you. In my whole police career of 43 years, I never had to shoot one person during that time. I never had to shoot one person. And I think that is through the grace of God. Because I don't know what would have happened if I did. Yes, we've been with the unrest in 77, 76, 77, 78. But give God the glory, I never had to shoot one person. And that is one of the most important things for me. Is whatever you do, trust in God with the abilities that He's given you and the knowledge. Give Him the glory, and you will never go wrong.